Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
The Home Secretary has warned big internet firms like Google, Facebook and Twitter that they could face new laws unless they step up efforts to tackle images of child abuse. He said he wanted the technology industry to block illegal material as soon as it's detected and to do more to help the police catch offenders. It comes as the National Crime Agency says there's been a significant rise in the number of child abuse images reported to it over the last 5 years. It estimates around 80,000 people in the UK present some kind of sexual threat to children online. Our Home Affairs correspondent June Kelly reports.
It's a final briefing before we actually go and execute the warrant.
Officers from the National Crime Agency gearing up for a recent raid on a suspected paedophile. Every month, the NCA and police forces around the country arrest around 400 people for accessing child abuse images online.
What was it I've done? Oh, what was it I'm supposed to...
Earlier this year, Matthew Folder, a Cambridge graduate, was sentenced after nearly a decade of offending. He operated on what's known as the dark web. He tricked his victims into sending him naked images of themselves. He even installed secret cameras in people's homes to film them in the shower and the toilet. He also encouraged acts of self-degradation. One of his many victims described the long-term effects of what he did to her.
I was ashamed of what I've done. All relationships broke down. You can't be friends with someone that doesn't trust you, and I didn't trust them. Even though they did nothing wrong, and I did nothing wrong, there was no trust anymore.
But why are child abuse images allowed to be posted in the first place, and then why are they permitted to remain online? For years, this is what the technology companies have been asked. Today, rather than posing questions, the Home Secretary issued an ultimatum to the tech giants.
There are some companies out there that refuse to take this seriously. So let me say this. I'm not just asking for change, I'm demanding it. And the people are demanding it too. And if the web giants do not take more measures to remove this type of content from their platforms, I will not be afraid to take action.
So the threat of legislation. The Home Secretary said that Google, Facebook, Microsoft, Twitter and Apple had made good progress in taking down terrorist content. And he wanted to see the same for child abuse.
This is high noon for the social networking sites. They haven't taken enough steps in the past, and the government is now saying that they're going to legislate to force them. That's crucial to protect children online.
In response, Google said it had a zero-tolerance approach to child sex abuse material, adding, "We've invested in technology, teams and partnerships to tackle this issue. And today we're making available cutting-edge artificial intelligence that can dramatically improve how companies review this content."
Rob, what goes
This is where many child sex abuse investigations start, in the operational area of the National Crime Agency.
Just to reassure you, there's no child abuse material on this computer.
Here they say the problem must be stopped at source.
Right now, as you can see from the results that we get, we're arresting hundreds of people. It is relatively straightforward for people to access images, indecent images of children, and that can't be normal, and that's what we need to challenge with industry.
The Home Secretary also announced an extra £21.5 million in funding for law enforcement to track down the most dangerous offenders, and more than £2.5 million for prevention work. June Kelly, BBC News.
Our correspondent Angus Crawford joins me now. It's a hugely complex area, this. Would new legislation make that much of a difference?
Well, there were very strong words from Sajid Javid today, but in truth, we have been here before. In 2013, the then Prime Minister David Cameron called a council of war, as he termed it, with Silicon Valley, and he demanded action. To be fair, he did get some. For example, Google enhanced its algorithms to block content, illegal content. Microsoft gave out for free new software which could detect illegal images online. And the British police created a new database to speed up their investigations, a database of illegal images. But the threat has simply outstripped both the technology and the resources, and creating effective legislation is going to be highly complex. It seems to me there are three seriously problematic areas. First, verification. We all know that if you have an email address and a phone, you can be anybody online, and in anonymity, criminality simply blossoms. Encryption. There's been a huge rise in the use of encrypted messaging and live streaming apps, including the dark web, and they simply can't be broken into by the police. And finally, jurisdiction. Sounds boring, very important. Many firms are based abroad. When British police complain that they want to get information from these companies, often it takes a lot of time, sometimes months, and it can cost a lot of money.
Angus Crawford, thank you.
The Home Secretary has revealed the scale of the threat from online paedophiles as he demanded internet companies do more to combat the problem. Sajid Javid said in the UK alone there could be up to 80,000 people who pose a threat to children. He announced more government funding for the authorities to tackle them, but he also said that tech giants need to do more, and he warned that if they don't act, the government will. One victim told ITV News about the terrifying effects online abuse had on her. And a warning, this report from our national editor, Allegra Stratton, contains details that you may find upsetting.
Causing or inciting a child to engage in sexual activity, possessing indecent images of children.
Sounds like the rap sheet from hell.
This is Matthew Folder, one of Britain's most prolific sex offenders at the moment of his arrest. Jailed this year for 137 sex offences, he took his paedophilia to new heights with new media. And he's not a one-off. Today, the Home Secretary called for technology companies to do much more.
The threat has evolved a lot more quickly than the industry's response, and industry has just not kept up. And there are some companies out there that refuse to take this seriously. So let me say this. I'm not just asking for change, I'm demanding it.
The Home Secretary said around 80,000 people in the UK pose some kind of sexual threat to children online. There's been a 700% increase in child abuse images referred to the National Crime Agency since 2012, and images of abused babies and children under 10 are becoming more common. When Jenny was 13, she was abused by a paedophile posing online as a woman. He made her send naked images of herself before going on to sexually assault her in her own home. Her attacker was sent to jail, but for her, the trauma didn't end.
When the perpetrator came to my house and abused me, he took photos of me, which were then used for further blackmail. And I was terrified of who was looking at those for years.
This is the specialist child abuse team at the National Crime Agency, scouring the internet for paedophile activity. They successfully convicted Matthew Folder. They believe technology companies could stop images the very moment they're uploaded.
The uploading, downloading and sharing of images is all preventable offending, which would ultimately drive down some of those volumes, because we know within that volume there are high-risk offenders, but we also know there's sadistic offenders operating on the dark web like Matthew Folder, whose express intent is to get coercive control over children.
Law enforcement agencies received some more money today, but both they and government insist it's tech giants that must act if they're to outwit 21st century predators.
Well, Allegra, I mean, very strong words from Sajid Javid, the Home Secretary, but many people might say, well, they've had a long time to do something about this, haven't they?
Absolutely.
But so what are they actually going to do about these tech giants?
Well, I mean, as you say, they have presided over this increase. He talked himself about a 700% increase since 2012. He's been part of the government that's presided over that. So it's a terrible job and task on their hands. Now, what I think is different today is that he's issued an ultimatum. He's said to the tech giants, unless you act by the autumn, then he'll come forward with something that's already in the pipeline, so I believe it to be true, the Online Harms White Paper, and he will force them to act. Now, I think actually what will probably happen is the tech giants will do something themselves. They won't want to be forced, and they were forced to act in a similar way after a series of terrorist attacks in this country, and then they did act and they took a lot of material down. They have the capability, they have the technology, so I think that with this speech today, he will probably have prompted them to do something. chilling. Something does have to be done, though, because the numbers today were truly chilling.
Yeah, it's horrifying, isn't it? Allegra, thank you very much.
Now, I'm not just asking for change, I am demanding it. That's what the Home Secretary told tech companies today, adding that if they don't step up their efforts to tackle online child sexual abuse, the government will be forced to legislate. More illegal content is being uploaded than ever before, with the National Crime Agency reporting a 7-fold increase in child sex abuse images being referred to them since 2013. With such a surge, our reporter Simeon Brown asks whether the government is taking the right approach.
So what was it I've done? Oh.
Even Matthew Fowler calls himself evil. Using the online aliases 666 Devil and Evil Mind, he tricked hundreds into sending him naked and indecent images. Although he never met his adult and teenage victims, he dehumanized them through blackmail and reposting their images.
Have you sent pictures of your blackmail victims to the parents?
No comment.
In February, he was given a 32-year prison sentence. But although this threat has been detained, there are thousands more. Today, the government revealed that up to 80,000 people in the UK present some kind of sexual threat to children online. And there has been a 700% increase in child abuse images being referred to the National Crime Agency over the last 5 years. Today, the Home Secretary made a threat to tech companies to do more.
There are some companies out there that refuse to take this seriously. So let me say this. I'm not just asking for change, I am demanding it. And the people are demanding it too. And if the web giants do not take more measures to remove this type of content from their platforms, I will not be afraid to take action.
We've heard this threat before, but right now the social media companies still regulate themselves, alongside independent organizations like this one. The Internet Watch Foundation say they removed 250,000 web pages carrying images of child abuse, but they're skeptical of how effective government intervention would be.
In the UK, whilst we have a major problem in relation to people looking at images, we actually take them down at a rate that is unrivaled across the world. So we remove images hosted in the UK in under 2 hours, and also the UK is one of the most hostile territories to host child sexual abuse.
Despite the progress in pulling down images, the NSPCC are adamant only regulation will force tech companies to prevent the material from going up in the first place.
We've seen 13 different self-regulatory initiatives over the last few years, and across the industry we haven't seen the steps that are necessary to make children safe. That's why now we're really clear. We want the government to step in and to introduce regulation for these platforms.
So why has government been unable or unwilling so far?
Do you feel that government is being outpaced by the internet, and have you lacked the digital skills to keep young people safe so far?
I think government, I don't think this just applies to the UK, have been outpaced by the speed of technological development. I think that's true of governments across the world. We're never going to understand a platform technology in exactly the same way, know everything about the code and things, and those who actually develop the platform themselves.
Software like Project Arachnid searched billions of pages to remove child abuse. It's the future and what the government is backing. But if children are going to be protected in the digital age, this is the world governments need to better comprehend.
Well, earlier I spoke to the Home Office Minister, Victoria Atkins, and asked her how tech companies were failing to keep up with people spreading images of child abuse online.
As the technology has developed, perpetrators, criminals have changed their ways to keep pace with the changing technologies. And I don't think, I agree with the Home Secretary, that the tech companies have done all that they should have done by now to stop these images from coming online.
The government's been trying to crack this problem for years now. A year ago, the previous Home Secretary announced £20 million to tackle online grooming. And in May, you announced new online safety laws to make the UK the safest country in the world for the web. So why don't you just legislate now? You've given them enough chances, haven't you?
Well, there's a huge piece of work coming up later this year called the Online Harms White Paper.
When?
Which looks at not just at child sexual abuse, but
When's
other
that coming,
downsides. Later this year.
But we've been waiting later this year
commitment.
for some time.
Well, it's taken us. We want to make sure that we get this this right. And we've set a very clear challenge today. The Home Secretary, I think, in his speech, set a very clear challenge to the tech companies that in the next couple of months, he expects to see real changes in the way they help us tackle the very worst offenders.
But you've issued that same challenge many times before, and they haven't stepped up to the plate, as you admit today. So why are you giving them one last chance?
Because we've seen from the work that they've done on terrorism that they can do better. And this is today was about saying to the tech industry, look, this is the last chance saloon. You have got to up your game. You've got to help us with this.
If this really is the last chance saloon this time, spell out today what kind of regulation you're looking at. Are social media companies going to be regulated the same way as traditional broadcasters, for example?
I'm not going to be drawn into the detail today because I would like the tech industry to feel the very, very clear pressure there is from the public, but also from government to do better.
But how can they feel that pressure if they don't know what the consequences are?
Well,
It could be just another empty threat.
Well, this is not. I mean, the Home Secretary made it very clear today that this is a personal priority for him.
Do you really think these multi-billion-dollar companies are going to be quaking in their boots today because of what the Home Secretary said?
I think they will be, actually. And in fairness to them, I mean, we have been meeting them regularly to express our expectations of them.
Just on a separate issue, but while we've got you in the studio, the Chequers plan today, is that now dead in the water? Are you still backing it?
Yes. No, it's not dead, and yes, I am backing it, just to clarify.
Glad you clarified that. I mean, Boris Johnson says of that plan, in adopting the Chequers proposals, we've gone into battle with the white flag fluttering over our leading tank.
Well, here we are today talking about child sexual exploitation on a scale and of a nature that, for most people, it will be beyond their imagination. That's what I'm focusing on today.
What has that got to do with Brexit, though?
Because that's what I'm focusing on. Brexit will carry on. We're going to leave in March, but my job as Minister for Crime, Safeguarding and Vulnerability is to help the Home Secretary keep our children safe.
Victoria Atkins, thank you very much.
Thank you.